In this episode, we'll be learning lessons from the near-death experience of an award-winning health expert, a veteran, advocate, international speaker, and the author of the best-selling book, You Are Deathless. Welcome to the show, Nicole. How are you
Thank
doing?
I am doing so well, Toby. Thank you so much for having me on your show. I really am grateful.
Thank you so much for making out the time to have this conversation with me, to have this soulful conversation. Thank you so much for, letting us make things work basically to make this happen. That is awesome. Um, you know, I, I really wanted to speak with you. I really wanted to speak with you because I read about your story and I was like, wow, I was touched. I was really touched. And I was like, yeah, we must have this conversation and I want to learn everything that you've experienced so far and what made all of that happened basically because why researching a little bit I found out that you are forced at the age of 19 to learn how to live and love differently following a terrifying and transformative needed experience, and you experienced other needed situations also afterwards again. um I don't know if you love to just well take us on that journey with you again, like talk to us about your life journey that led you to that point at the age of 19, and what you remember 20 years after the crash happened. I know I read that 20 years after the crash, that's when the memory of the crash actually came back to you. So can you share this with us, please?
Absolutely. Well, I grew up in the South in Jackson, Mississippi, and my dad was in the military, and he wanted one of us four kids to follow in his footsteps and go into one of the service academies. So I was a people pleaser. I'm in recovery for people pleasing. Okay. And if you think about that identity, we want to please other people. You think about how you have to twist yourself into all these different positions to please them. And actually, that is based in fear. You're fearing that they're not going to like you or love you if you don't, do what they want you to do. So I would tell any other people pleasers out there, look at how that identity is not serving you and try to let go of it, because in the end, you don't get anything out of it. But back at 19, I was trying to please my father. So I had gone from a career where I was doing ballet. I was doing everything except military. I did not enjoy the military. I had no interest in airplanes or anything like that. But all of a sudden, my dad's like, I really want you to go. They just admitted women. Why don't you apply and let's see what happens? Well, I applied and I got accepted. And I knew the first week of boot camp that this was not for me or my soul. And so the thing is, with my family, we don't accept failure. We can't quit. That is not permissible in our family to quit something. You're considered a loser. And my dad has very high expectations, and you're supposed to just tough it out. So the thought of quitting the academy after all this effort that went into getting me accepted in there, I just couldn't do it. The shame, the humiliation, the embarrassment, I couldn't face it if I did that. So I went on with that, knowing that I was terrified most days. I was in fear that I wasn't going to make it through, boot camp and all these different things, because I was not a varsity athlete and I was struggling there. I really, really was. But somehow I made it. And then my second year, I go back and it gets tougher each year academically and militarily. And I just was like, I just don't want to be here. But once again, couldn't get up the nerve to just say, this isn't for me. And my parents never gave me permission to say, Nicole, if this isn't for you, come home. It was very abusive. Most of the academies are verbally, physically, and for women, sexually abusive. And so I endured a lot of abuse. And I just kept telling myself, I didn't want to think about it. I didn't want to feel it. It was just get through it. So I really put all my emotions in a lockbox in my stomach, and I turned the key off, and I just went on sheer willpower. But the beginning of my sophomore year, I was at an event and we were getting a ride back. I was getting a ride back to the academy with a senior, and I didn't know him very well. The event was to kick off the school year. There'd been alcohol provided. And needless to say, he had been drinking and wanted to stop and get some more alcohol. And I didn't realize, see, my dad never let me date. So his rules were no drinking, no smoking, and no dating. Well, that's all the fun of college, right?
Yeah.
and so and so I had never done that. I never rebelled. And so for the first time in my life, I thought I'm going to just enjoy myself. And boy, did I get slammed because I did go have those two drinks, two beers with him. I did smoke a cigarette. And then he wanted to make out. And that was his agenda. And I didn't realize that. And so I told him, no, we got to get back to the academy. And the last thing I remembered, we were in a Corvette convertible in 1965. I woke up in the ICU. And if you can see this picture,
Mm.
that is what the Corvette looked like after the crash. That is
Wow.
my side of it. I was pronounced dead at the scene of the crash. Some bystanders heard it, came out, tried to get some vitals on me, could not, covered me up with a blanket and waited for the first responders to get there. The driver was conscious. He had some injuries on his back, but he was well over the legal limit with alcohol. And needless to say, he did get to graduate because rank has its privilege, and his dad was a 3-star general in Washington. So that was something that I really had to deal with as well, this sense of justice not being done.
Mm.
But aside from that, I'm pronounced dead at the scene. The EMT comes, takes the blanket off, can't get any vitals on me. So he does the one last thing he knows to do, which is a sternal knuckle press. And that is designed to elicit pain in the body. And when he did that, my right eye flinched and my pupil dilated. So he
Mm.
knew I was still alive. And if you've ever heard that saying, your eyes are the window to your soul, you
Yeah.
ever heard that?
Yes, I have. Yes, I have. Yeah.
At that moment, my soul, which had flown out of my body when I went through the windshield, uh, it had gone straight up. An angel came and got me. I later remembered. So my soul was in a different plane in heaven, wherever you want to call it. It came back through my eye. And at that point, they were able to get a blood pressure reading on me of 60 over zero. Now, that's
Mm.
still pretty much dead because the normal blood pressure is 120, 130 over 80. So they immediately did CPR, got me to the nearest community hospital, and just tried to stabilize me that night. I proceeded to be in the hospital 4 months, 7 weeks in ICU, major injuries, and didn't think I'd walk again. Had to have a colostomy to divert my stools. It was really, really bad. And needless to say, during another operation, I had a code blue. My heart stopped. They pronounced me dead again. So I actually didn't have one, not two, but I had 3 near-death experiences because
Wow.
I wanted to go back to that place that my body remembered 19, almost 20 years later, that was filled with this absolute beauty, light, loving kindness, and just this natural, everlasting peace. It was so comforting. And all I knew was being in this body was going to be pain and suffering. And who the heck wants to sign up for that? So I did
Mm.
try to leave again and go back, but this angel kept bringing me back and saying, no, Nicole, you need to stay in your physical body. You have a mission. So 19 years later, I'm going to work. I just got on with my life. And 19 years later, as I'm going to work at the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention in Atlanta, um, all of a sudden I stop at Starbucks, I get my caffeine, and I remember exactly how I'm sitting in the car. And I start remembering the actual accident, how he made a sexual pass at me, and I said no while he was driving, and he got very angry with me, and he turned the wheel of the car, it fishtailed, and the car hit a boulder and then flipped over and landed on its top, and we were both thrown out. And
Mm.
so I remember when I was going through the windshield, I froze midair. And at that point, I called him Casper the Friendly Ghost because I didn't know who it was, but it was this angel, and it was a male angel. And he came down and he took me up to heaven, to the space above, where there were all these other beings, angels, guides. And you have to remember now, I'm not in human form. I can see my body in a ditch, all mangled and dead. It's a corpse.
Mm.
And I'm not looking through human eyes either, okay? Because when your soul leaves you, you have to remember we all have an energy body. And upon death, that energy body cracks from the top of your head all the way down, and your soul leaves you. And so I'm over there. That's my soul on the other side. And I'm hearing other angels. Now, they're not talking English. I don't know how I'm hearing this, whether it's telepathy, it's vibrational, but I'm able to interpret it. And one of the message was, please ask us for help. The angels want to help us here on earth with our lives, to make them easier, to make them more hopeful. But we have to ask for help. And that's because of something called free will. We have choices in our life to do A or B. So they're not going to interfere unless it's an emergency situation like mine was. And I called out, I remember calling out, oh my God, help me. And I knew I was going to die when I hit the ground. So I had no memory of the physical pain of hitting the ground because my soul left before that happened. But I knew I was going to die.
Mm.
The other message that my Casper gave me was, he told me I was going back and I was going to get in that body. And I was like, no, 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 no. I do not want to go back. Please don't send me back. I didn't have a choice. Some people do have a choice on the other side. I did not. And he told me my mission was going to be to tell people to not be afraid of death. And while that might seemingly seem like a quite simple message, it has taken me almost 4 decades to understand what that looks like for me. And now, finally, I understand that purpose, and I have shifted my focus toward the spirituality that is essential to our wellness. I went into the wellness field as a result of this, became a dietitian. So I focused a lot on the physical well-being of people, telling them what to eat. Of course, most of them didn't listen, but anyway, I tried. I'd get those fruits and vegetables in, and then I went into the emotional, because most people suppress their emotions, including myself. And in order to heal, these emotions have to come up and out, and you have to heal them. And then the spirituality part is the part of wellness that I'm focusing on now. And in almost every book that you read, the author's death is cloaked in this veil of doom and gloom. And death has this cloud of depression and negativity around it throughout our culture and society. We're in, at least in America, I don't know about Germany, but we're in death denial over here. We just don't think it's going to happen to us. And I certainly didn't think it was going to happen to me at 19. I mean, we're all immortal at 19 and 20, right? We don't think
Yeah.
anything's going to happen to us.
Mm.
But my experience, along with hundreds of thousands of other people that have had near-death experience, is 100% different. And death is this absolute beauty light that I'm talking about. I only remembered that white, bright light for that 19 to 20 years. That's the only memory I had that something beyond me happened. So it wasn't the operating room lights. It was that most commonly shared experience among NDEers, which is this white light. Some people call it a tunnel, but it's absolutely you're just like in a cocoon, and just so safe and warm, and there's no fear, there's no pain, there's no negativity, there's no attachment to identities. It's just beautiful. So with this in mind, that's what I'm here to do now, is to help change the worldview and vibration and cultural misunderstanding around death. And to do this, we have to start addressing our fears.
Yeah.
And most people unconsciously fear death. And we do that because we haven't experienced it, And what I want to say to people is, everything that I experienced was positive. Everything. And there's actually 10 common lessons from NDEers that It's through a study that the International Association of Near Death did in 2020 in their annual report. And the first one was "We Do Not Die."
Mm,
And that's the title of my book, You Are Deathless. And what I mean by that is your soul lives on. Your soul has many incarnations.
mm,
And when I talk about your soul, I mean it in the sense of it's your eternal self, which includes all your lives. Okay. These are your past life experiences, your experiences and your whole you. That's what I mean by the soul. And
mm,
so that part of you leaves. That's that vapor part of you when you pass, your breath, you take your breath away and you're just this um this corpse, the shell of a body. And
mm,
so that is my mission. And it's amazing to me. We're in a lot of fear in our country right now. And fear is a very low vibration. And when you're making decisions, Toby, out of fear, you're using that part of your brain, those two almond shaped or whatever they're called, amygdala, where your fight, flight, fear response is.
mhm.
So if you're in fear, you're not going to make the best decisions for yourself. They're going to
Mm,
wind up sabotaging you. And if you
yeah.
think about it, when you're in fear, you lose clarity, right? So in order to regain your clarity, you got to address your fears.
Mm,
So that's why I wrote this book, and writing it actually helped in my healing journey. But I also put a death, what do I want to call it? A fear checklist of death in there so that you
mm,
can check and see, are these any of the fears that you have about death? And a lot of people do fear dying alone. And I will tell you, you do not die alone. Okay. There's this whole spiritual realm, and the angels come in, deceased loved ones come in, even your deceased pets. Okay. Your pets have a soul, and they come in and they escort you over to the other side. So you are never alone. You may not see them physically, but they are there spiritually. And so you can take comfort in knowing that you're never going to be alone on your journey to the next, uh, back home.
yeah, yeah. Wow, Nicole, I've learned so much from you, from from what you've said, shared so far. I mean, these are things. This is something that it's not new to me. I've heard about this before, but hearing from you, it's even in deeper insight. Basically, like I'm hearing things in a different way that I've never heard before. That's really deep. And thank you so much for sharing that. I must say, I mean, thank you so much for enlightening us on how your needed experience was. But one thing I would love to pick out from there is, you said your angel sent you back on this mission to tell us that, we are all deathless, basically, that we should not be afraid of, death. So can you tell us, or can you share some tips on how we could overcome our fears or our fear for death also?
Okay, well, I will tell you, your beliefs about God shape your relationship with death.
Mm,
So, what is your concept of God, source, whatever you want to call um, this being greater than us that created this us and this planet? Most people call it God, but I was raised uh, Southern Baptist and Lutheran. Okay, and I know a lot of people are raised Catholic. Well, they present a concept of God that is dual, meaning God is loving and protective and will be there for you, but God is also judgmental and critical, and the wrath of God will come upon you if you are a sinner.
mm,
And so you have these two faces of God, or pieces of God. And what I have experienced growing up is that the fear part is what runs your nervous system. You're so scared that you're not going to get the rules right, that you're not going to go to heaven, because you're taught that if you don't go to heaven, you're going to go to a place called hell, and you'll be eternally separated from God and your family. And that will scare the peewee out of any young kid, right? And adult,
Mm-hmm.
to think that you're going to be eternally separated, because we're talking about eternity here. This is the biggest topic in our lives, is where we go from here. And so I had to reconceptualize God. That's where I had to start, because when I went over to the other side, guess what? No fear, no judgment, no none of that. It was all a big fat lie. And it was a false belief system that was instilled into me by the theology of these certain religions. And it was not about fear at all. In fact, if someone is teaching you that God is someone to fear, that is, in my opinion, uh, that's a red flag. God is love. Okay, period. God is that energy, that white light that brings you all of that peace and comfort and beauty and all of this. That presence is God, and there is nowhere that God is not, Toby. God is everywhere. God is in nature. I mean, he's I call it, or he, or whatever you want to call it. It is everywhere. So when people ask me, do I go to church? I said, I just go into nature. I go right outside. And to me, I can connect with God there in the beauty of animals and trees and flowers and all that is beautiful on this beautiful planet. So it is about reconceptualizing God in a relationship where you're not fearing God. So if you think about, I actually looked this up, the definition of fear from the King James Version of the Bible back into the 1600s, fear meant awe and reverence. Okay. So every near death experiencer I have talked to or read about has been in awe and in reverence of the beauty of the whole experience of God. Okay. Well, somewhere along the line, somebody screwed that definition of fear up and made it about being afraid. Okay. So it's not what it was originally intended to be. And now it's about, just being scared all the time, which you're not going to live your life if you're in fear. And that's what I want people to understand. As long as you're fearing death or you're living in fear, you're making those decisions from a place in your brain where you're not going to make the highest and greatest, best decision for yourself. And so it's got to come out of this prefrontal cortex. And to get there, you've got to get into a parasympathetic state instead of being on alert all the time. And there's different ways to do that. There's a lot of modalities out there now that are helping people deal with these unconscious limiting beliefs they have. There's neuroemotional technique, there's EMDR, there's tapping, there's biofeedback, there's hypnosis. There's all kinds of ways to address, that piece of your brain that is unconscious, but has set the pattern in place. So when you get triggered presently, unknowingly, you're going back and you're repeating something that you never dealt with in your life.
Yeah, and I'm sure that in your book you even go into much more details about this, about how we could overcome fear, and how we could liberate ourselves from all the fears that we have stuck in our body system.
Most of
would
them are irrational too. They're just not. They don't make sense. They're coming from your father, your generationally or ancestrally or societally. And you can start see now in the world, we're starting to break down a lot of those old belief systems because they're just not true. So they're
Yeah.
starting to crumble. And we need to do that in our own personal lives. These limiting belief systems that are sabotaging you from becoming the being that you were meant to be and want to
Yeah.
be.
hmm Yeah, that's true. That's very, very true. But Nicole, would you say if once we're able to overcome our fears, our rational, irrational fears, once we're able to let go of them, are we going to be able to live a full life? Are we going to be able to fulfill our purpose in life also?
Absolutely, because then you'll be in alignment. And when I talk about alignment, your mind, your body, your soul, your spirit, you're all connected and grounded. Okay. And that means you're not cutting off your emotions. You're able to embody your emotions. You're able to have a relationship with your soul. Because one of the things we don't talk about is our soul relationship and what that looks like. And, in America, we have so many veterans that commit suicide every day, 22 every single day. And
Wow.
what I am confident of is that we don't address something called soul loss. So when you're in a traumatic situation and your body can't process and deal with it, what happens is your soul will fracture. Parts of it will leave you in order for you to deal with living in this human world. And so what people experience when they go to war are these atrocities in the name of God, most of them. And you go, what kind of God would do something like this? Right. And so that's another area where you get real confused with God and the God you may have grown up with. How can you allow this to happen? Well, that's not who God is. God is not a vending machine. It's not about putting a behavior in and doing these good works and doing everything right. And then you're supposed to get you press the Coca-Cola button and out comes Coke. So many times you press Coke and out comes Mountain Dew or some other thing that you didn't want, or maybe nothing comes out, but it's always back on you. You're the problem. You didn't do something right. If your prayer isn't answered, well, you must not have prayed. You must not have had enough faith, or, there's always the problem is you. And that is just not true, because God is not a vending machine. That is never who God was. But we have been misled by a lot of religions that that's the way God operates. And it's simply just not true. But I know that when you get in alignment and you start this relationship and dialogue with your soul, that you start becoming, you start unraveling all these filters that have been put upon you, and you start figuring out who you are and what your voice is. And it's not about worrying about hurting someone's feelings. I was raised, you don't hurt your mother's feelings. You don't get angry at your parents. Well, that is not true. If you need to voice something and say something that is your truth and it hurts her feelings, that's their problem, especially if you're owning it. I feel when you said blah, 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 that XYZ, keeping it in the I, but that is really, really important in your soul's development. And there's a couple of ways to do that. I get them from Lee Harris, who is a great channeler. And he says, if you're journaling, start your journal with, what is it my soul wants to tell me today? So write that at the top of the page, and then just write and see what happens and see what your soul wants to tell you. And you may go, okay, nothing came on that piece of paper. Well, tomorrow, do it again and do it again, and at least stick with it for a month. And you will start realizing it's starting to speak to you. The other thing is just to invite your soul in. And you can just say, I invite my soul to offer to me whatever I need, right? To offer to me, and I will receive it. Now you got to be ready, because it may be part of your shadow side that you have not wanted to look at about yourself. And we
Yeah.
all have a shadow side, and we need to start dealing with it. And that's why I say I've come through a near-death experience into a spiritually transformative experience, because every part of my life has changed as a result of that near-death experience. And I have become more spiritually alive and connected and passionate. And that would have never happened if I didn't have the wreck, because all of my family of origin still believes that to get to God, you have to go through Jesus Christ or something external. And I'm like, no, no, no. God is within all of us. He is an eternal spark that is within each one of us. There is nothing external you have to go to get to God. And that's why you have the relationship with Source and with your soul. And it works for you. but it's hard to let some of these ideas and beliefs go because you're in fear of, well, what if I'm wrong? What if, and the
Yes.
truth is, if you really start understanding the true nature of all these positive pieces of death, everyone and everything is connected. And when
Mm,
our soul leaves, we're this one big consciousness. There's no division. And so that is comforting. The fact that we're not going to be judged. If we could start today, Toby, not judging ourselves, start
mm,
there. When you catch yourself judging yourself, whether you're saying, I should have done this, take that word out of your vocabulary.
mm,
Should is a shaming message to yourself or to someone else. And be compassionate, be gentle with yourself. You're doing the best you can, and start talking to yourself in a more gentle way.
mm,
And I guarantee you, when you start doing that, then the love comes in for yourself because you're not beating yourself up like you used to or that other people would do to you. And that's another thing. You got to get rid of toxic and narcissistic people that are in your life. They are pulling you down. That negativity, you got to get away from it.
mhm. Yeah, that's
So
totally
those
true.
are those are some ideas. Those are some ideas.
Yeah, I mean, Nicole, you shared a lot of practical things that we could make use of to, overcome fear and to live a full life again. That's so awesome. But if you could reflect back on your journey so far, would you say, with everything that you've learned, with your journey of writing your book, You Are Deathless, and the journeys that you've been on, would you say you have been able to fully heal yourself? Or have you been able to fully align your soul with your spirit, your mind, your body after having those three near-death experiences?
I will say healing is a journey that we're all on and it never ends. Okay.
Mm,
So I
mm,
continue to evolve in my healing journey. Just after the book was released in August, I started smelling cigar smoke. Nobody in my family smoked cigars or cigarettes.
mm,
And I got into meditation, and my grandfather on my father's side appeared. And he told me that he was the angel. He's Casper the ghost, and that he came and he pulled me up. He saw the abuse that I was going through, and he was the one that saved me. And it was interesting because he died at age 58 in the middle of August. And last August, middle of August, I was 58 years old. And he
mm,
said, now is the time for you to understand this is who really came to save you. Because I
mm,
had read a lot of near death experiencers see deceased loved ones, or they, see other people that they know. And I just said, well, I just saw Casper, this figurine of Casper, the friendly ghost. And so
mm,
now I
mm,
know it's my angel James, and he told me he
mm,
would be with me until I pass. So we
mm,
all have at least one guardian angel. So get to know that guardian angel. You can ask. It's not complicated. You can just say, can you please help me understand my relationship with you better? What is your name? Please help me find a parking space. I know that sounds trivial, but it works. They don't disappoint. So
Yeah.
start experimenting. You have absolutely nothing to lose and
Mm.
everything to gain.
Yeah, yes. You have absolutely nothing to lose. And you're talking about we being connected to the source. Or I just love to go back to that. I mean, I really appreciate that. That's so wonderful. You know, letting us know that we are more than this body that we are. Basically, we are connected to a divine being that is way beyond our understanding, and the way we all go about it could be different. I, for example, for one, I believe in God, and I believe there's Jesus, and Jesus connects us with God, and there are other people that have other beliefs also, which we
Mhm.
also respect, basically. Yeah. If there's one thing that you want people to take home from this episode or from reading your book, You Are Deathless, what would be that one thing?
Uh, well, of course, it's going to be to not fear death, because if you're not fearing death, you will live in freedom and to be
Mm,
free. And when you're in fear, you can't be free. It's just not
mm,
compatible. So, in order to free yourself to live forever right now, because here's the thing about death, it's the most common shared experience, and we never know when it's going to happen to us or one of our loved ones. So you have to live forever right now, today. But to do that, you have to start awakening your consciousness to who you really are and start balancing your humanity and your spirituality. I mean, yeah, your humanness and your spirituality.
Yes, yes, I love that. I'm not going to add anything to that. That's so beautiful, Nicole. For people out there who still have more questions, who still like to, get in contact with you to maybe ask some other things, or even to just get the book and get some counseling. I know, the link to your website will be in the show notes of this episode, and your social media platforms also are available for everyone. But I want you to tell us the best way for us to get across to you.
Just on my website, I have a contact page. It's www.nicolekerr.com. I will
Mm,
also send you the first chapter of my book for free if you want to read that. And I will also, depending on the time zone, if you select my book for your book club, because I really want this book to be a book club. I want people to start talking about it, start talking about what your concept of death is, what your fears
mm,
are around it. Start
mm,
sharing that so it's not this dark, doom and gloom thing.
mm.
And if you do that, I will try to pop in on your book club discussion if I can make it, in my time, fit my time zone. So I'm willing to
Yeah,
do that. I'm also on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram if you want to connect with me there. And
yeah.
I would just like to say that, where we're going, we're actually going home. And
Mm,
the last of the lessons that the 10 lessons is we all are going to have a life review at the end of our
mm,
lives. And
mm.
we learn how everything that we say, we do, and we think during this physical life here on earth impacted ourselves, others, and the world. So when you do things, be mindful of what you're doing and what you're saying, and be gentle and loving of yourself first and foremost.
Yes. Be gentle and loving of yourself. Yeah, I love that. Thank you so much, Nicole. I really appreciate this. I
You're welcome.
I'm so delighted speaking to have spoken with you today in this episode, and I encourage everyone out there who is interested to pick up the book, to visit the website. Even questions for book clubs are on your website for you to download and to make use of. So many resources are available on your website. So one more time, the link is in the show notes of this episode. Click on it, copy the link, and get across to Nicole that way. Thank you so much, Nicole.
Auf Wiedersehen.
Auf Wiedersehen.